and that might better put in perspective some of what may seem disjointed comments that I make.
Kia ora, Sue. When you're ready. Kia ora.
This submission has been prepared by John Klavsich, that's I, the Speaker, on behalf of the Kaiwaha Marae and the Wahapu and Y250 and Y203 claimant interests. This is our response to the public notice of Northland Regional Council to application of Final District Council for renewal of the resource consent for the continued operation of the Opunoni Wastewater Treatment Plant, Baker Road, Opunoni, that serves the township of Opunoni and Omapere, Hokianga, and the existing connections that are outside these townships. As an introductory statement, it needs to be said the continuing process of the Waitangi Tribunal process must be given regard additional to any information for the full consent sought required by the applicant. And I think that's quite a critical point. There are things that we may argue for which will assume a different value with the release of their findings. The above points needs to be taken into consideration so that the critical essential points raised in the Waitangi Tribunal process are properly taken into account. With respect, the commentary of, in particular, the CTA provided by FNDC, we appreciate the effort to provide this assessment. However, my submission is the information should not be used or considered to be sufficiently strong enough by which to subsume evidence made by council submissions to the Waitangi Tribunal hearings and decision process and this hearings process. The marae I represent has been party to the hearing since 1983. It was at that time our senior representative leaders of Te Wahapu met to discuss the proposal, and it was a strong representative group. The discussion was led by the late Mr. Wiri Te Whata. He was the principal elder of that area. Reverend Piri Iraya, Tauro Tamihana and his half-brother, the Reverend Mauri Marsden, were principal speakers. And I, with the late Bill Dunn, Mr. Bill Dunn and Mr. Chris Darman from Te Kaiwaha, were present, thereby fulfilling our ancestral linkages to Kohohuia. In a historical sense, the area of concern to those elders was the Kohohuia subdivision of ancestral land from the fire station north to the Waiorohia stream, which went through the Māori land court hearings in 1950, that the poorly drained shallow soils constantly underwater concerned them. The matter was summed up by Wiri Te Whata, who said in closing the discussions, "What use is our land if we are unable to use it?" The gathering left with the understanding they would not oppose, neither would they support the proposal. It was beyond their dignity to be involved. They felt that their mana was separate to that. To we, the listeners, it seemed to us, despite the cultural concerns, it came down to us arguing for the most effective and efficient operation of the system. And this is not to be construed as if our elders had stepped aside from the cultural understandings. Neither were they captured in the social health needs of their beneficiaries and locked into the system to protect these as anxieties. When the hearings took place in the Opanoni Hall, the only two local Māori submitters were the late Ben Moringa from Whirinaki, whose concern was the defilement of the seafood resources, and myself. Having regard to our elders' statements, I tried as best I could to promote my uncle's leaders' concerns. The only contribution I made was to point out the outfall was far too short and too close to the south shore, and the discharge unlikely to be caught by the weight of the current further northwards and out from the current buoy where it now is. Shortly after that, I became part of the Hokianga County Council. I understood and appreciated the cultural concerns we expressed at the last renewal, where we argued for greater acknowledgement to the festival well-being of the Waiarohia, which is allowed to lie dry of water for lengthy summer periods. We agreed successfully for a bypass of the storage dam, sufficient to keep the Waiarohia living downstream the dam. The bypass water source was never to my mind put in place. The Waiata Marama water sources relieves pressure on the Waiarohia. As a community, we believe the safety and stability of the two schools at Omapre Opanoni Area School and at Koutu Te Kura Kaupapa Hokianga, our principal concerns, and their safety should be assured. And I want to emphasize that point. I considered at the time of building consent for the Koutu Kura was given that insufficient attention was given to the Kura wastewater. I still hold this view and consider it is a matter that must be kept monitored, improvements made to that system. Why the concern? A good question. What use the seeking of higher treatment standards for Opanoni system with the potential that upstream waters be allowed to negate the extra efforts for higher treatment at Waiarohia to be compromised? It's not logical. The cultural community I represent wish to maintain the health and safety of both schools for the special elements of education each provides. We would much rather prefer to be proactive rather than simply close our eyes to the issue of maintaining and proactively supportive of the well-being of the two places of learning in the future of young people of this area of Hokianga. I then go on to say that I made all those points known to the Minister of Settlement, and basically, and I just want to refer to it because I couldn't find the letters that I was looking for, so I didn't include it, but I will get that to you. Well, I just got to say, though prepared in haste, the letter nonetheless captures the unenviable position we are placed in by how the settlement process can be compromised by statutory processes we must respond to. And it's a point that I don't think should be left aside. I think there is and yet we need to keep our focus on the major critical issue of the future security and well-being of our community for the benefit of our young people. I need to explain why I've included that submission, and I think I've done that. Thus, this involvement in this application to renew resources to renew resources consents for the Opunoni wastewater treatment plant is an issue we need to deal with in a strong, pragmatic fashion. The last and unforgivable event that could happen is for some malfunction or unexpected health issues that may arise with the wastewater discharge at Kotukura. And I then go on to say we consider the best practical solution is to bring the kura and the intervening residential and pakana marae into the Opunoni treatment system. I refer to paragraph 3 submission of the Waitangi Tribunal attachment, which is not there. At previous renewal of consents hearings, we objected to the discharge into the harbour and its location. This objection remains. We also sought, and still do, for UV treatment prior to discharge, with much closer attention to monitoring of the discharge. The other concern we expressed was to where the discharge fluid has eventually been deposited. In pure layman's ignorance, we believe it cannot be made to disappear. It's there somewhere and we want to know where. And I think that's a valid question to ask. The term mixing area is difficult to understand, and our understanding in layman's term is salt and fresh water do not mix, rather they separate out. Should it happen the repository place for the discharge be upon a mussel bed, and I raise that point because I've had comments made from people from the north side who said that when they fish on Tokata at low water, that there is a strong unknown smell to them on the rocks beyond them out towards the wreck. And I think that's a point that needs to be followed up. What happens to the discharge eventually? Where can it end up? We would like hard evidence where the discharge eventually finishes up. We ask the applicant to give more consideration to extending the discharge point offshore more to where the weight of outgoing harbour waters are, for higher UV treatment at the point of prior to the discharge, and for more regular housekeeping, better use made of it when dealing with it. The final and emphasised point this submission makes is this: we have strong cultural objections to the placement of the plant and discharge elements in this culturally sensitive area. The discharge of treated wastewater, despite the best of intentions, is not only culturally but also socially a matter of objection to other people outside our cultural network. It's more general. Simply discharging to what I would describe to as a receptive land is neither an answer and is certainly not a solution. It eventually is going to come into the harbour. We believe it is a national issue. New Zealand has many communities in the same situation as we are. Thus, in our view, finding a better method to deal with community wastewater is a national issue and not left to periodic regurgitation of the same issues unresolved and still socially unacceptable at the local level intergenerationally. It can't go on like that. At this time in our Te Wāpu history, 200 years on from the first contacts, we of Te Wāpu, through the settlement process, are putting in place, as sound as we are able to provide, a sound, fair and equitable foundation for the next 200-year period for our descendants. Nothing more, nothing less than that. It is the intention of the writer to file this with the Waitangi Tribunal as an essential element to our settlement claim. And I'd just like to thank the panel for this opportunity to file this response. The final issue, I consider the 35-year period unacceptable if it's left as a block. I would suggest the issues of concern we raised deserve a better structure to report back, advise of outcomes to our concerns. Therefore, I would ask that the 35 years be split into manageable time blocks of 4 periods, an initial 5-year period, then every 10-year period, so to the 35-year period sought. I think that's a practical way of getting across some of the concerns that have been raised, and dare say, for you people to keep council honest. And thank you for the opportunity to express these concerns and for you to consider them in making your decision. I brought along to show to the panel, you've had a site visit, you've seen it in certain conditions, but the Hokianga area has got a life of its own. It's never the same, each day is different. This photograph. Could I just pass these over to the table for you to have a look?
Kia ora, Matua. Would it be okay if we all had a look over the morning tea break of the photos?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Maybe screw up. Would a piece of paper be better?
All right, that'll be fine.
Kia ora. And just, our great thanks to you, Matua, for coming out. It might have taken 93 years, but thank you
And
so much.
afterwards, there was, if I could have the indulgence of the table to have 10 minutes to express some personal points that I want to make. And it's my association with the place and the school and the schooling in the area. So thank you very much.
Happy for the Matua to have 10 minutes there if he's ready to speak about personal.
Madam Chair, I just got about 7 or 8 short points. I've lived all my life in this area of the Hokianga. I can still recall the childhood smells and sensations while walking to school from Waipatapata Valley, over the newly formed road over Pakia Hill, down alongside the old tram line, which took the timber from Waimaku down to the wharf by the hotel. Then along the beach, tide permitting, to the Omapri Primary School, where I began the short period of schooling. And the beach in those days was totally different to what it is now. It was mostly shingle and had the groin effect. And then the sand was a narrow band of sand at the high water mark. But from the high water mark down to low water was shingle. It's changed completely. The memories of the Omapri School evokes the early childhood experience of the smell of dust and the sharp smell of camphosa of the basic toilets of those times. They were basic, quite basic. That was the smell of hot sand and tea tree remained with me. And then, of course, the weekly roster of the senior pupils every Friday to prepare the burial hole for the weekly emptying of the toilet cans, a responsibility which every pupil received. They all had to do it. An experience every child had in their own family home life. In any case, for the school experience, it was camphosa and hot sand, the retained memory factor in later years. And that's the strongest sensation I can remember of my early childhood, the smell of camphosa in the toilets. The Omapri School closed down in 1971. I kept in contact with the school, then later into the difficult period of establishing the Opanoni Primary School of 2 years of life, then on to the current Opanoni Area School until completion and opening. I was involved in the establishment of the area school. In hindsight, the logistics and planning were less than what was required. There was no community waste system in place at that time, and the school relied on the conventional septic tank system. The school, however, was built on clay subsoil. Inevitably, problems were quickly experienced, but fortunately an adjoining landowner made part of his land above the school available, and this enabled the school to continue operating by pumping the effluent up into the large rock-filled area. Awaiting the commissioning of the Openoni-o-Mapara system to become available. The community system was commissioned. There was no disruption to the school's functioning daily onwards. The new school was not the only community-faced facility to experience location problems. And I want to make this comment because I need to make it to remind that if there was not a wastewater treatment system available, the kokohuia whakarongotai marae, able to be connected to it, there will probably not be a functioning marae kokohuia now. So, we've got to remember some of these points. They're the practicalities of living. But having said that, it does not dispel the cultural and spiritual need at using the customary historic site at Waiarohia and the waters of the Hokianga to complete the treatment system. And just as a side note, the Openoni Area School pupils do their cross-harbour swim from Pauahi across to Waiarohia. And that there must be a continuing focus for alternative wastewater disposal or treatment systems found. And it would be best done at the national level. It's not at the local. The local level can provide information, but the practical resolution, I believe, is at the national level. That's where the money lies, and that's where it should be carried out, not at the local level. Having and living with a culturally acceptable system in a clean environment, culturally acceptable to Maori people, has to be a national issue also. It can't be done at local level. Meanwhile, the best use and careful operation of the Openoni-o-Mapara system by council must be encouraged and ensured. And I think that's the bottom line. And then I go on to make a comment about the 35-year period. And I want to conclude is our home is above Araituru. We are the last house out looking down onto the harbour entrance. And over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a constant shifting and changing of the morphology of the harbour floor. And I think that has got to be kept monitored to ensure that the statements that when the discharge is released, it'll do this, it'll finish up there. That may not be the case if there's not the certainty of what the harbour entrance dynamics are. And that's got to be monitored as well as the discharge. The last thing I want to say, that when you look out from Openoni across to Whānui and Pauahi, there's a huge sandbank occurred offshore there, and that must have a bearing on the flow of water on the outgoing tide. And then when the Hokianga and the dynamic Te Wahaku features of subsumed by rain, as in the last instance for several days, by the brown upper harbour and land floodwater flushings, that has to be a concern as well. So I think that in the next generation, issues like that need to be looked at and resolved. Because there's no use using the harbour waters and saying we're doing the best we can And then you get something from up the top, and that's negating all of that. But that's your fella's job, you know. Well, people, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak. You lose practice when you have to stay away from the community functions like this. I thank you very, very much. I wish you well in your deliberations. And if any of you wish a copy of some of those prints, I'll certainly make them available if you wish so. But the harbour you see in passing is not the harbour that you live with. And I just want to make that point to put into perspective to get a better value of the points that other submitters have raised. So thank you very much.
Martin, it's clear the only thing that's not working is your ears. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Kia ora.